Welcome everyone to another episode of the Hector and Mike Experience, Common Sense in an Uncommon World. And Mike, we are the day right after this presidential debate, and I mean the world is abuzz. The world was abuzz during the debate, after the debate, and man, it is not what I expected. It is, I had these different press releases already written for clients, post debate, just kind of the shell of them. And I was going to, talk about, okay, did they talk about immigration? Did they talk about the economy? Talk about this? And two of the four clients said, we're just not going to send anything out because we can't ignore the elephant in the room and just ignore the whole thing. So have you ever seen anything like this?
No, I have not. I have never seen anything that started as bad as it did. Just him walking out to the podium was, I think, for anybody, shocking. The hesitancy, the almost lost look that he had, and honestly, from a human standpoint, I think most people, especially as you get up in years, have had people that you see that happen to as they get older, and it's heartbreaking. But then when he started and he couldn't enunciate, it only added to it. And then even when they did the appropriate softballs, like when Jake Tapper would come in and do the save because Joe Biden couldn't get out of it, or Dana Bash then quickly turned from the economy to abortion. When the next logical thing would have been, if you're talking about issues that people care about, it would have been the economy and immigration. But she turned from economy to abortion. So, again, throwing him a lifeline or a rope. And, he starts talking about how moms are worried about their daughters having reproductive rights. And, Trump just swoops in and starts talking about moms worrying about their daughters being raped and killed by illegal immigrants, which, of course, has happened in the last 2 weeks. It was just from beginning to end a shocking display, and one that's very disturbing as well, from the standpoint of the country. So, right. It's some people say who won and who lost the debate. I mean, I don't think anybody can doubt that Donald Trump won the debate. Who lost the debate? I think America did, because Joe Biden is not a candidate for president. Joe Biden is the president. And if, our enemies are looking at that debate last night, they're probably smiling a little bit, or quite a bit.
And you're right, Mike, in the sense of when you looked at it, there was a sense of, you got a sense of feeling bad for the guy, because look, we're all going to get there. I mean, we're all going to get there in age. We're all going to get there, our bodies just go through this decline. And what got me thinking is, who's really making the calls right now in the White House? And why weren't those individuals who interact with him on a daily basis more upfront and saying, you know what, we don't think he's ready to run or he shouldn't run? Because what you got last night in that performance, and I think it's important for people to realize, it was the Biden team that wanted that debate. They're the ones who set up the dates. They're the ones who wanted this forum, the way it was set up. And Donald Trump said, sure, I'll debate you anywhere, anytime. And he accepted their terms.
Right.
And so to put him out there in this way, and the reason I say this is because after the debate, when you've got Van Jones, when you've got members of the Democratic establishment, I mean, just almost in absolute shock, and almost in tears by what they just saw. And it was an immediate call. Okay, we've got to do something. We've got to go find someone. This can't go. This can't happen. This can't go on. I mean, it seems as though they were all taken by surprise of what they saw. And if they were all taken by surprise, someone knows, and someone would have known. And you don't do this 4 months before the election.
Well, first of all, they should know. Number one, number two, number three, number four, number one, number two, number three, number four, which is, by the way, apparently how he keeps things compartmentalized is this number one, number two, number one, number two. I lost count after a while, but he did have that part right. He got the one, he got the two after the one. It is, first of all, Donald Trump had a great line, which was, he had several great lines, but one of them was, Joe, you've never fired anybody in your life. When he was talking about, Biden was talking about the president firing his general and others, and Trump comes back and hits him with that. And this is one of the times he should fire somebody. He should fire whoever it was that A, thought this was a good idea, and B, prepared him for this. Out the door. Because they did him and our country a huge disservice. It was just a disaster from day one. Not being able to counter Trump as Trump was talking was a huge mistake, tactical mistake by the Biden campaign, because it allowed Trump to say whatever he wanted to say, and there was no coming back. And after the debate, you heard Biden spinsters, when they came out, by the way, there was a great piece on NBC with the guy in the spin room, and they showed this group of people on one side of the room talking to reporters that were the Trump surrogates, and there was absolutely no one in the room from the Biden campaign. They did not come out for quite a while. Yeah. And so, it was that kind of thing that whoever thought that that was a good idea, and the Biden campaign was like, well, the moderators should have fact-checked the President Trump. That's not their job to fact-check President Trump. That's the candidate's job, who the President Trump is running against. Okay. And so whoever it was that had this idea, thought it was good, had this format, thought it was good, should not be working for the President Biden right now. He should get rid of him, number one. Number two, to Van Jones's point, it's what I said last night, which is, if Van Jones and other Democrats believe that they need to replace Joe Biden as the nominee of the Democrat Party for President of the United States because he's too old and mentally and physically incapable of being the candidate, then the 25th Amendment should be invoked. Because Joe Biden is not running for president. Joe Biden is the president. He is in the Oval Office. He is making, theoretically, decisions. He's the person there now. So if their argument is, he's not up to the job of running for president, being president is a hell of a lot tougher than running for president. He should be, they should invoke the 25th. They had a disaster.
I'm in agreement with you. And the thing is that you've got, the last couple of days, you've got Joe Scarborough, you've got the comms director, and I forgot her name, the spokesperson for the White House.
Jean Pierre.
Yeah, she's out there talking about how, he's never, he's sharp, he runs the meetings, he takes charge of everything. I mean, they've got there's an entire video montage that has been put together of all these White House officials talking about how they've never had and seen anyone more sharp than Joe Biden. They've never, he basically controls the White House, and for them. But what we saw yesterday was nothing of that. What we saw yesterday is an individual who is up there in age, can't formulate his sentences, can't formulate his thoughts, and it was just, like I said, it was just a spectacle. And where the Democratic Party goes from here, I don't know. I mean, because it's interesting too. And the other thing I found really revealing is during the break, especially as I was watching CNN last night. During the break, Van Jones comes back and he says, "Well, I just got a reaming by some people reaming me for the comments I made, and that we shouldn't throw Joe under the bus just over one debate because Republicans wouldn't do that. And so, are we being too harsh? Are we being too this?" And so you started seeing not a 180 turn, more like a maybe 45-degree turn, saying, well, it was one debate, it was one outing, and then the campaign released a report. What, 50 minutes into the debate, he had a cold, he wasn't feeling well, and so the excuses started coming, and so I don't know what they do. I will say this though: later on, when on MSNBC, Kamala Harris came out. And it is a tough job being in the spin room. You and I have been in these spin rooms for not only for presidential debates, but for gubernatorial and other items. And it can be a tough job, especially if your candidate doesn't perform well.
Right.
And so you're out there just spinning as best as you possibly
You're
can.
taking the bullets. That's your job.
And she did well. She did really well. They were trying to talk about his age. Says, I will tell you, for the last 3.5 years, this is what the Joe Biden I know. He is focused on this, and focused on this. And after she was done with her interview, everyone on the panel, including the Republicans, were like, why haven't they brought her out more? Why is she in Los Angeles? Why wasn't she at the debate, especially it's in Atlanta? Why wasn't she there? And so I just a tremendous amount of talk.
Yeah, well, it's unfortunately, and we were texting earlier in the debate. What struck me is that just the image, the visual, the presentation completely overshadows the substance. And both of them had some really good points that they made during the course. Even Joe did. What stunned me is I thought, and maybe it's just me, that Joe Biden would stand there and attack the president, President Trump, because he's a convicted felon. Every chance he had. He only mentioned it once. And he said he had the morals of an alley cat. It's like, dude, seriously? I mean, and that was about it. And that surprised me. Again, I think that's a strategic decision someone in the campaign made, which I think was a mistake. On the other side, President Trump had a great point, and he brought it up several times, about Afghanistan.
Yeah.
And you could see one of the things that got Joe pissed off was when Trump talked about how he helped the military men and women and Joe Biden didn't. And he used Afghanistan as an example where we chased our tail, cut and run, left American assets, billions and billions in assets and technology there, left,
Our allies
back, left our allies, left the people that were helping us, that were on the ground there to fend for themselves and die. You saw people dropping off of airplanes as they were taking off, U.S. military airplanes as they were taking off from the air base there, evacuating and running. And, none of that has been talked about much, and it should be. The other point that Trump made, and then he let it go, which I think is a significant one, is Biden, argues how well he's done in fixing the COVID problem. Well, the reality was, and Trump brought it out yesterday for the first time, more people died under Joe Biden and COVID a year after COVID had hit, when we had vaccines, people getting shots in the arm. There were more people dying then than there were during the heart of the situation. And so those kinds of things never really came out because I think the visual and the presentation was so overpowering and just so stark that all of that kind of stuff gets lost. The other thing is there's only one debate left. Okay, mm-hmm. I mean they've I don't know, I don't remember when it is, but
it's after the conventions.
Yeah, it should be after the conventions. Mm-hmm. The other problem, I don't know what their rating was, but I would bet you it was pretty good because there's nothing on network TV during the summer. There's no major sporting events going on during the summer. Basketball's done, hockey's done. The only thing you have right now is some baseball. So it was the thing to watch, and and I think a lot of people. I would bet you a lot of people did watch it.
You're right. It's and the the visual was the dominant, and you're right. Each one did make some good points, but none of that was really the talk after the debate.
No.
The talk
It,
after the debate was what they saw with Joe Biden.
right.
They later on they came back, and this was like an hour and a half, 2 hours later. They brought in the fact checkers, and I've seen a little bit of the fact checkers, but that was more of an afterthought. What you're seeing today, this morning, is the headlines from the New York Times, the Washington Post, Political, and all these major newspapers, and it's a similar theme. What do Democrats do now? Is there a way to replace them? There's something just came up from the Washington Post. Here are the rules to replace them. Is has this thing gone too far? Is there no way to salvage this Biden election? And so that's the narrative coming in today. That'll be the narrative coming into as we go into the 4th of July, time, and right afterwards, because they're going to have to figure out and make a decision. And it's also interesting in this sense that even on Twitter, or as we're looking at some of these political folks that were talking, Axelrod was on CNN. None of them mentioned the potential Kamala Harris as the person to take over the campaign for Joe Biden.
Mm-hmm.
They mentioned Gretchen Whitmire, I think from Michigan. Yeah, they mentioned Gavin Newsom. They mentioned other people, but she was not in the discussion.
Well, her unfavorables are higher than his. I think people, even people that don't support him, kind of like him. They don't like her. He was losing, I think, on the national polls, like by 1.5 to Trump. She's been losing consistently over 6 points to Trump. And the other part is, if you think that Trump did a number on Biden yesterday, wait till you see Kamala Harris there, because he's going to go after her like nobody's business. Remember, one of the major issues in this country, not just in Texas, Arizona, and California, but around the country, is illegal immigration. And how it's not only impacting our cities, but impacting budgets, impacting social services, impacting the minority community that exists in those cities. And Joe Biden, in his infinite wisdom and his people's infinite wisdom, put Kamala Harris very early on in charge of the southern border.
Yeah.
And if you don't think that, Donald Trump's going to do a dance on her, if she ends up being the nominee, you're dreaming, because, it was handed to him. It's an issue that's been handed to him. And, Joe Biden was just amazing to me in that the mentality, the way they think, because they asked about the black community and winning, why black people are not supporting Joe Biden the way they usually do, the way they usually support Democrats. And, he's like, yeah, there needs to be more. That's why I want to give every black person that wants to buy a house $10,000. It's like, well, wait, what?
Yeah.
Can you describe pandering any more than that? Just because of the color of your skin, I'm going to give you money to buy a house. And by the way, it's not your money; it's my money. It's your money. It's people who pay their taxes money. It was just this mentality thing that it was pretty shocking. But I don't think that again, I'm just going to go back to the thing I said in the beginning. If they want to replace Joe Biden as the nominee, then they should replace Joe Biden as the president, because they're not saying Joe Biden shouldn't be the nominee because of where he stands on policy. They're saying he should not be the nominee because he is not capable of executing the job as the nominee of the party. Well, being president is a whole hell of a lot tougher than being the nominee of the Democrat Party. If he's not up to doing the job as the nominee, he is not up to doing the job as president, and they should have him, and they should invoke the 25th.
Yeah, there's no argument here on that. I think it's self-evident, and which, as I brought up a little earlier. So who's running the White House? Who's making all these policy decisions? Who's making these policy decisions on immigration, which we've just had a huge move on immigration, on what was it? He made several decisions, kind of executive orders and so forth on the student loans. Who's making all these big decisions? Is it, if he's not, if the performance that he provided yesterday, for an hour and a half, if he's not able to kind of, because these are all his issues, and it's not, it's not as though, and I was talking to a couple people this morning, it's like, well, they're complicated issues. I mean, these things, it wasn't they knew what they were going to get asked. And so if he's not able to perform in this particular level, then how is he performing in the White House? And if he's not performing in the White House, who's actually pulling these levers of power and making and pushing these items through?
I would say two people. Number one, the chief of staff. And I say that because that's what someone at the Small Business Administration said in a Zoom conference with people that the press happened to be listening in on, that it's the chief of staff, I forgot the person's name off the top of my head, that is the one that calls all the shots and makes all the determinations and assigns all of the duties to the cabinet members on behalf of the president. He's the one that's running it. The second person was the person who walked up on stage after the debate was over and escorted Joe off the debate stage, and that's Joe Biden. And if that was ever a scene that was both shocking and kind of heart-wrenching, because again, there's a human component to this where you see the person who's in essence a caregiver helping someone who needs a little bit of help. Those are the two that are running the show, I think, very clearly. But you knew it was going to be a bad night when he got the abortion question wrong. I mean, that was the softball. It's like, okay, pivot. And so, he's not able to pivot. So the reporter, Dana Bash, does it for him by asking a question about abortion, which is their sweet spot. And he muffs it, badly muffs it. Opens the door to Trump talking about illegal immigration. Mm-hmm. And so when you saw him screw that one up, in essence, you knew it was not going to get any better. And I think that's when people were somewhat, if they weren't shocked by the appearance, by the voice, by the lost look. And by the way, to go back to what I said a minute ago, not to beat a dead horse, mm-hmm. Whoever in that campaign said we want side-by-sides should be taken out and, drawn and quartered in Lafayette Square across from the White House. Because the way they showed it with Trump here and the president and Joe Biden here and, Trump looking authoritative, aggressive, in charge. And Joe just, the cutaway when Joe was not talking, he looked completely lost. Mm-hmm. I mean, he just looked completely out of it. Now, the funny part to me, because I got a weird sense of humor, was, sometimes when Trump was talking about stuff that even I didn't understand, I'm looking at Joe, and Joe's got this look, and it's like, well, at least he's got a look at it. Now I've got the look that Joe's got because I don't understand what Trump's talking about, but it sounds good. And it was just kind of funny in that regard. But those side-by-side shots were, to me, devastating because it was just this visual of two completely different people in their stages of life. And, again, whoever did that, whoever said that was the rules we want, they shouldn't. Their White House credentials should have been revoked at 7:00 this morning.
Well, one of the spinsters, I'm trying to remember what station, MSNBC or so forth, indicated that one of the reasons that it made Joe, the side-by-side that you mentioned made Joe Biden look bad was because he was on the wrong side. He should have been on the other podium because, the way the moderators work. And so they were trying to blame his looking over one side and just kind of looking lost because he prefers to be on the other side of the podium as opposed to where he was stationed. He should have been where Trump was at and not, and that plus the cough. Yes. Yeah. And the cough. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. The cold. He's got a cold. That's what they're down to. And so,
yeah, well, that's pretty lame.
Which highlights today's all of today's headlines. It is this gone? And that, it's a fair question. Mike, do you think this is gone? Do you think
No,
is there any? Can
no.
you resurrect this?
Can he resurrect it? The only way he resurrects it is he lets Trump, become. One of the things about Trump, I mean, I will say, for a good portion of that debate, Trump was very disciplined.
He was
He
controlled.
really was. He was on message. He talked about things people care about. He didn't talk about himself. He talked about things that affect people every day. He talked about what he had done, his administration had done before COVID. He even talked about what they had done during COVID, which I think was significant. But then of course, at some point in time, it's got to go off the rails. So let's compare our golf scores. Let's see who can hit a ball farther than the other person. That kind of stuff. But I think what Biden's strategy, and you could see Biden was trying to goad him at one point, and Trump wasn't taking the bait. How do they come back? They come back by trying to get Trump to self explode. And I will tell you that while that may have been his nature in the past, I think the people that are around President Trump now, as opposed to some of the people that might have been there before, are a lot more smart and strategic and political. And no one controls President Trump. I mean, anybody that's worked for him knows that.
Right.
But they have a way of channeling him the way they did for a good part of that debate last night, that people looked and said, which one of these two? They're not asking which one do I like. They're asking which one do I think can get us to a better place, and has the capability to do that. That's why I think CNN, I saw this morning, had a poll that said I think 59 or 60% of the people thought Trump won the debate.
Yeah.
Now, if you got 60% of people watching CNN saying Trump won the debate, that's pretty significant.
Right. Yeah. It is significant, and where they go from here, I don't know. It's gonna be a fascinating kind of look in the next this next week. But if they end up pulling the plug on his president, on his campaign, they've got the questions that become, is he? And that's the next. I think that's the next round of questions which you brought up is, if he's not competent enough to run for president, how is he competent enough to be president?
Right.
And
Exactly.
I think that becomes the next line of discussion that is going to be had in this country, just based on his performance. And I think, heads are going to start to roll I would say in the next week, where it's like, why the hell weren't you being honest with us? Because look, as I was talking to Amy earlier, it's everyone's, especially in politics, like most things, but especially in politics, everyone's about themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And so you've got these congressional members that are saying, how is this going to impact my district now that I've got to run for re-election? You've got these senators, U.S. senators, who are enjoying their plush offices, who are enjoying the majority, saying, okay, how is this performance if he stays on? If he stays on and continues to run for president, how is this going to impact my race?
The guy in Ohio, the senator in Ohio, who is, the senator in Pennsylvania. I think it's Casey, but the senator in Ohio, I forgot his name. Oh, Sherrod Brown. I mean, he's got a strong contender in Bernie Moreno on the Republican side. Dave McCormick's running for the Senate for the Republicans in Pennsylvania. Both of those incumbent Democrat senators got to be sitting there going, how close do I want to be to this guy right now?
Right. And what happens to fundraising?
Right.
I mean, look, you will always have your diehards on each side. Right now, it is, the margins are pretty tight in a lot of these battleground states. And I think it's important for people to realize is, some of these elections were won in these states by 10,000 votes, 20,000 votes.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you start losing part of that base, or that base starts questioning you, where do you make up the numbers, especially when you're so freaking tight right now?
Right.
And so that is got to be that that concern that happens right now. I think what's his name, the congressman from New York who just lost, was it Jamal? Was it Jamal Brown? Yeah, or Bo? Yeah, I mean, they needed that guy to pull the fire alarm. They needed something to get themselves out of there. But I think they're going to have to figure out, do they themselves pull the fire alarm or something and say, okay, we need to abandon ship. We need to get out of here. Because if as you know, politics as well as, we've been doing it for a long time, is there's a lot of self-interest. And it isn't just a candidate, it is the staff, it is the chiefs of staff, it is everyone else down below who they have hitched their economic lives on these horses that are congressional members and US senators, or these other groups. And so they're going to be asking themselves, okay, how much damage is this going to be to me? And if they assess that it's too much damage for them, you're going to have those whispers, you're going to have that discussion to be had, okay, there needs to be a replacement.
I don't know how they do it. If they do it, that it has to be like you take off the Band-Aid with one rip, as opposed to a little bit at a time. I don't see it happening. I really don't, unless the president himself decides that it's time. I don't think it happens unless he decides or someone decides for him.
Why don't they just tell him that he decided already?
Oh, don't you remember that? Oh, yeah, I do remember that. That's when I ordered the ice cream cone, too. Yeah.
At the Waffle House. We were talking about the Waffle House.
Or just don't tell him and have him do it, and then some point in time, he'll be like, how come I'm always on the beach in Delaware? I don't understand this. Don't I have to go to work?
And I know it's funny. And I try to make a joke out of it. But the thing is that this is one of those situations where, and I'm trying to remember, was it the classified documents, the tapes, right? When they were interviewing him for these classified documents that he had over in his garage or next to his Corvette or so forth, or his vehicle. There was an interview that was done. Mm-hmm. And the special prosecutor said, we don't really want to charge the guy. He's elderly. He thought he was still vice president. And so they just provided enough information to say he may not be all there mentally, right, but there's these tapes that the Department of Justice has not wanted to release.
Right.
And so in the joke, you kind of come back to it, is, the guy in this interview thought he was still vice president.
Right. Well, that's a great point, because I think in any other case, they may have said, that there was enough evidence there to bring a case, but the whole thing was, and it was unusual, because usually that's not their job. Their job is to present the facts to a grand jury, and a grand jury decides if there's enough facts to indict.
Right.
Now, then once you go off of that fact, after the grand jury indictment, then the prosecutor can look at the case and say, well, this is going to be tough to do, because that people look at him and they feel bad for him. He's got memory loss. But that's when that happens. It does not happen in the beginning of the process, and it did this time. So that raised a lot of red flags. But yeah, I mean, that's, people were saying, is it going to be the Joe Biden that was at the State of the Union, or is it going to be Joe Biden who did those tapes? Clearly, it was the Joe Biden who did those tapes. That was, there was no, whatever it was they gave him at State of the Union, they didn't put enough of something in it, because he was nowhere like he was in State of the Union.
But also with people who go through this, right? Who are, whether it's dementia, whether it's just age, sometimes they will deteriorate mentally within 2 to 3 months at a rapid pace. Mm-hmm. I know Stephen has been working with his mom and stuff, who's got dementia, and in talking to him, even talking about this debate, he says you could have someone completely different like 4 months later, 4 or 5 months later. Yeah. Because sometimes there just becomes this rapid decline. And so, yes, the person you got at the State of the Union address seems a whole lot different than the person you just got last night. And I think, and the thing is, this isn't whether he can go and win the election. It's, you're voting for someone to be president for the next 4 years.
Right.
And is he going to be president for the next 4 years? In the sense of, is he going to be able to carry out the duties of being president for those 4 years, not whether can he just win on election night and we'll figure it out from there.
Well, in that regard, it becomes what you talked about earlier. If he does stay on, and I think he will, it introduces a new question within the campaign, which is Kamala Harris. Because nobody in their right mind thinks that Joe Biden will last for 4 years in that position, after watching last night, will last 4 years as President of the United States. So in effect, on November 5th, even if he's still on the ballot, you're really voting for Kamala Harris if you're casting that vote. And, now the question becomes, for the Trump campaign, do they focus more on her than they ordinarily would have? Because I think anybody that looked at this thing yesterday, no matter what side you're on, saw something very stark and very alarming. And the question becomes now is what you just said, which is, this isn't about him on November 5th. This is about what happens on January 20th and what happens in March and what happens in November of 2025. Because, I don't think anybody, I'm not a doctor, but I don't think anybody can look at that and say, this guy's got 4 years left in him.
Right. So,
as president of, as serving at that high, I mean, I'm not saying he doesn't have 4 years left in his lifespan, but
right.
Serving as the president of the United States and all of the things you have to deal with on an everyday basis, I don't think anybody sees that anymore.
Right, and I get it. You're not saying whether he's going to die, but whether he's got the mental and health capacity by which to carry out the duties of the office, and so,
Right.
And I think that becomes a kind of an important item. But yeah, Mike, let's leave it here, and then let's see what happens this week. It is going to be an amazing discussion. I know you're going to be speaking to your folks over, at the RNC, at some of the other places, as I am too, and it's just some wild times.
Interesting. And for people that are listening, watch and see what your own local people do, because you brought up that point, and I think it's a good one. In politics, and we've been in it a long time, your friend today is someone that you don't even remember tomorrow if it's going to hurt you. And I think a lot of people last night, places like in Ohio, Pennsylvania, even Arizona, that are going to be swing states and key states where a lot of money is going to be spent. Some of these down ballot races, they're going to be looking at this saying, we've got to distance ourselves from him as opposed to embracing him. It's going to be, interesting for folks to watch that at the local level to see what their people are doing.
Right. All right, Mike, until the next time.
Take care, everybody.